So yeah, last night we talked a lot about Robert Maxwell, but it's pretty well established that he was a triple agent, most likely, for the MI6 in the UK, the Soviet KGB, and the Israeli Mossad. So, shortly before his death, a former employee of Israel's military intelligence directorate approached a number of news organizations in Britain and the US with the allegation that Maxwell and the Daily Mirror's foreign editor were both longtime agents of the Mossad. Maxwell was alleged to have distributed a bugged version of the software Promise to a plethora of national governments and global financial institutions that enabled mass spying by the government of Israel. Maxwell was allegedly able to sell the bugged Israeli version of Promise software to Sandia National Laboratories and Los Alamos National Laboratories, two of the most important nuclear research and national security facilities in the United States. Maxwell allegedly employed John Tower, chairman of the United States Senate Committee on Armed Forces, to facilitate the sales of the bugged Israeli version of Promise software to Sandia and Los Alamos. So, his intelligence connections are very clear. It's also known that he introduced Epstein to Ghislaine Maxwell, his daughter. So definitely something going on there. Now, for Epstein's history, I think the best place to start is at the Dalton School. And for there, I think we should start with Donald Barr, Bill Barr's father, the one who was in charge of the prison system when Epstein, ended himself, allegedly. Probably not. So, thing to know about Donald Barr is that he was a member of the Office of Strategic Services. Now, this was basically the CIA before the CIA was the CIA. When you're a part of one of these intelligence agencies, you just don't stop being a member of it. You go into other sections of society and you most likely still retain some level of those connections. So he was an administrator at Columbia University, and then he was the headmaster at the Dalton School in New York City. And he hired Epstein at the Dalton School. And that's when he started to kind of rise up through, the ranks of society, I guess you could say. But let's see if we could find out anything else significant about Donald Barr's career, because the main thing that I know about him is that he wrote an alien porn called Space Relations. But yeah, let's see what else he had in here. For a brief time at the end of his tenure as headmaster, Jeffrey Epstein was employed as the math teacher. It is unclear. Oh, they're saying it is unclear whether Barr hired Epstein. I've definitely seen it in numerous sources, but I guess, hey, it's disputed. But regardless, Epstein was hired at the Dalton School at the time when he was the headmaster, probably in charge of hiring people, and they most likely interacted. And so, yeah, here's this. In 1973, Barr published Space Relations, a science fiction novel about a planet ruled by oligarchs who engage in slavery. Wow, I didn't realize that part. It has been noted that the plot of the novel anticipates the crimes of Epstein and his accomplice Ghislaine Maxwell. Wow, I did not. I just thought it was like alien porn. I didn't realize that it had that sick element to it. And it's wild that they still have that in a glass case at the Dalton School or something like that. So yeah, let's see. Barr also reviewed books for the New York Times. Not much there aside from that, but that is definitely significant. So from there, Epstein goes on to Bear Stearns, where he is hired by this guy named Alan Greenberg. So this guy had some interesting connections as well. He was the CEO of Bear Stearns from 1978 to 1993. So this was a couple years before they ended up collapsing. He was also an author. While serving as chairman, Bear Stearns oversaw the collapse of the company. Okay, he did oversee the collapse of the company in March 2008. So he was the chairman of the executive committee after he was CEO. Very interesting. He was subsequently involved in the talks with JP Morgan Chase, which eventually bought out the company. Okay. So the other interesting thing about this guy is that he was also connected to Roy Cohn, who we talked about last night. So let's see where this starts. 2 years later, Ronald Lauder, whose only professional experience at that point was working for his parents' cosmetic company, was appointed to serve as the United States Deputy Assistant Secretary of Defense for the European and NATO affairs. I love how these titles are so long when they give people who shouldn't have a job, and they just make up these really long titles, deputy assistant. Soon after his appointment, he served on the dinner tribute committee for a dinner hosted by the Jewish fraternity and strongly pro-Israel organization B'nai B'rith, the parent organization of the controversial Anti-Defamation League in Roy Cohn's honor. Cohn's influential father, Albert Cohn, was longtime president. So the dinner specifically sought to honor Cohn for his pro-Israel advocacy and his efforts to fortify Israel's economy. And its honorary chairman included media mogul Rupert Murdoch, who's another connection with at least the Maxwells, Donald Trump, and then head of Bear Stearns, Alan Greenberg, all of whom are connected to Epstein. But either way, there are some threads linking Epstein's boss at Bear Stearns to Roy Cohn, which is just another interesting connection. So then, after leaving Bear Stearns in 1981, Epstein founded an Intercontinental Assets Group, and he described it as a financial bounty hunter organization. He said that he was recovering hidden money, essentially. And during that time, he was said to work with Adnan Khashoggi, Douglas Leese. Khashoggi was a Saudi arms dealer, and he was also involved with Iran-Contra, which stuff came out on that recently. Douglas Leese, who was a British arms dealer connected to MI6. So a couple of interesting connections there. So that the period that he was at Bear Stearns is kind of one of the most mysterious parts of his life, I'd say. You know, not a ton is known except for the fact that he rose through the ranks pretty quickly. He lied on his resume and he got caught. And instead of trying to lie his way out of it, he actually just told the truth and said, yeah, I lied because you would have never accepted me anyway. And then kind of flipped it around on them. And then they let him keep his position. And then he just continued to kind of rise through the ranks there, mostly through kissing ass. Is the most honest descriptions that I've heard. Yeah, so that period of time is a little bit mysterious. But after that, we know that he hooked up with Les Wexner, which is kind of where his wealth really starts to explode. Les Wexner is the founder of Victoria's Secret, and he is just a general business tycoon from Ohio, and also probably involved with the mafia. There are a lot of different situations where I'll just get into the main one. He is suspected of being behind like a mafia style murder of a lawyer named Arthur Shapiro. So let's take a look at this situation here. And then we'll look at Les Wexner's connections to Epstein and some of the other stuff there. So Arthur Shapiro was in trouble. The shy, secretive lawyer, a partner in the Columbus, Ohio law firm Schwartz, Shapiro, Kelm, and Warren, was under investigation by the Internal Revenue Service for failing to file income tax returns for 7 years and for possible investments in shady tax shelters. In March 1985, Shapiro was due to testify before a grand jury over his tax dodging and whether anyone had helped him hide the money. What he might reveal, no one knew, but he and his firm had several high-profile clients and a long history in Columbus. But Arthur Shapiro never made it to the stand. A day before his scheduled testimony, someone fired 2 bullets point blank into his head as he fled from a secretive breakfast meeting held in his red BMW at a Columbus cemetery. The mob-style murder has never been solved. Shapiro reportedly personally oversaw the account for The Limited, the clothing company owned by billionaire Les Wexner, whose empire also included popular brands like Lane Bryant Express and Victoria's Secret. Neither Wexner, whose communications team declined to comment for this piece, nor anyone tied to him were ever thought to be involved in Arthur Shapiro's death. Instead, a business partner of Shapiro's was the prime suspect. The case's curious twists and turns, though, would result in a controversial police report that accused some of Wexner's business associates of having mob associations. Shapiro's name would also appear decades later, seemingly as a red herring in an FBI file involving the activities of another man important to Wexner's businesses, the financier Jeffrey Epstein. But for the most part, Arthur Shapiro's death became just that, a footnote in a bureaucratic file. So this is, it kind of gets deeper into that, and if you want to research the story further, you can, but it essentially gets into the fact that this guy was very likely taken out by the mafia, by somebody who, he was going to testify about in this case of whoever he was messing around with their money or hiding their money or whatever was happening. And yeah, so this was one of the main things that kind of linked him to violence, but they were also very close to the crime families in New York. I'm not sure if that's mentioned here, but that is mentioned in another article I found, where the other wild thing is that let's take a look at Wexner's Wikipedia page and let's look at Southern Air Transport. So this is a wild, wild story. Wexner hired Jeffrey Epstein as his personal financial manager from 1987 to 2007. He was the primary client of Epstein, who claimed to only work with clients with a net worth of over $1 billion. Wexner purchased his New York property, the Hubert N. Strauss House, in 1989 and sold it to Epstein in the mid-1990s following Wexner's marriage to Abigail. I'm pretty sure he gave that to him or sold it to him for a very cheap price. In July 1991, Wexner granted Epstein power of attorney, and he also instated him as a trustee on the board of the Wexner Foundation. So this was just probably a couple years after meeting him. In the 1990s, Les Wexner and Jeffrey Epstein were involved in relocating Southern Air Transport, a CIA front organization with ties to the Iran-Contra affair and alleged CIA drug smuggling, from Miami to Columbus. So this is confirmed. This is Wikipedia confirmed by multiple mainstream news outlets. Southern Air transported goods related to Wexner's businesses, but in 1996, customs agents found a hidden shipment of cocaine on one of the planes. Southern Air was shut down in 1998 after Wexner had received federal aid for relocation of the airline, just weeks before the CIA Inspector General released its official findings on the Contra cocaine trafficking allegations. Wexner had been accused of failing to take action when complaints were raised against Epstein after executive of L Brands reported in the mid-1990s that Epstein was abusing his power and his connection to Wexner by posing as a recruiter for Victoria's Secret models. Yeah, he definitely used that a lot in his schemes, the fact that he was connected to that business. Let's see if I can actually share this.
Was shot down over Nicaragua. The aircraft belonged to Southern Air Transport, a CIA front company used to move weapons in secret. After the scandal broke, one man quietly helped clean up the aftermath: Jeffrey Epstein. Epstein assisted in relocating Southern Air Transport's aircraft to a new base in Columbus, Ohio. The same planes that once carried arms to Nicaragua and Iran soon began servicing the retail empire of Leslie Wexner, the pro-Israel billionaire owner of Victoria's Secret and Abercrombie & Fitch. Just a few years later, in 1991, Wexner granted Epstein power of attorney over his vast fortune. The move came as Wexner was under scrutiny following the mafia-style murder of a lawyer connected to his company named Arthur Shapiro. Epstein's role in inheriting and repurposing the Southern Air Transport planes was just one of his many links tying him to the Iran-Contra network. He also moved in elite circles with major arms dealers like Adnan Khashoggi and Douglas Leese, figures known or alleged to have been involved in Iran-Contra. A recent profile of Epstein revealed another striking detail. During the 1980s, Epstein lived with John Stanley Pottinger, a figure who also played a key role in CIA-backed efforts to traffic weapons illegally to Iran. This story of Epstein, Iran-Contra, and hidden power is told through the trail of Southern Air Transport aircraft and private emails from Epstein's own leaked Yahoo inbox. You can read the full investigation on DropSite.
That was the DropSite report that came out a couple weeks ago. And, that was one of the most telling pieces of evidence I think we have on the whole intelligence connections. So after that, let's see what else I had. There's also the Ehud Barak stuff. So we're really still not entirely clear on the extent of what was going on with Epstein and Ehud Barak, but they had a intelligence offering similar to Palantir, I believe, that they were shopping around to different governments. And I think we can probably dig in a little bit into the emails between them and see what was going on there. Let's go into the photos. There were quite a few things in here, one of which I noticed last night that gave me pause. And this makes it very easy to scroll through them. But yeah, look at this. She's with these Russian soldiers. This makes me think of that whole triple agent thing. Like, how many different countries are y'all involved with on this spy intelligence level? There's also a couple of photos of passports. He had multiple passports. I was going to look at which countries they were from. Maybe I could just search Epstein's passports and they'll come up, but because I think one of them might have been Saudi Arabian, if I'm not mistaken. Why isn't it up at the top though? For some reason, I was thinking it was up at the top before. Yeah, we have this right here. Requests for multiple passports. That's a U.S. passport. Yeah, this was the one I saw in the files here. Yeah, so it's listing his residence as Saudi Arabia. That's what it was. But this is apparently an Austrian passport. Earlier on, we reported that images of an old US passport belonging to Epstein had been included in the data release. So he has multiple passports from multiple different countries.